Maria Santos walked across the restaurant floor with a smile on her face. She had been working at Bella Vista for almost 2 years now. The restaurant was fancy and expensive. Rich people came here to eat Italian food and talk about their business deals. It was a busy Friday night in Miami. The restaurant was full of people in nice clothes. Maria wore her black uniform and white apron. She had worked hard to keep this job. The money helped her pay for her small apartment and send some back to her family. Maria looked at her notepad. Table 7 needed attention. She walked over to the corner table where a man sat alone. He looked to be around 50 years old. His suit looked very expensive. His watch was shiny gold. He kept looking at his phone and checking the time. The man had short gray hair and cold blue eyes. He sat up straight in his chair like he owned the whole restaurant. Maria could tell he was someone important. Maybe a business owner or lawyer. These types of people came to Bella Vista all the time. Maria approached the table with her usual friendly smile. She had learned to be extra polite with the wealthy customers. They could be difficult sometimes, but they also tipped well when they were happy. "Good evening, sir," Maria said in her clear voice. "Welcome to Bella Vista. My name is Maria and I will be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink?" The man looked up from his phone. His face showed annoyance right away. Maria noticed how his eyes seemed to judge her. Immediately. She had seen this look before from some customers. It made her feel small and uncomfortable. The man stared at her for a few seconds without speaking. Maria kept her smile, waiting for his response. She wondered if maybe he was having a bad day or was upset about something else. "Excuse me, miss," the man said in a sharp tone. His voice was loud enough that people at nearby tables could hear. "Could you please send someone who speaks proper English? I have important business calls to make tonight. I need someone who can communicate clearly." Maria felt her heart sink. The words hit her like a cold wave. She had heard comments like this before, but they still hurt every time. Her smile faded just a little, but she tried to keep her professional appearance. Other people in the restaurant started to look their way. Maria felt her cheeks get warm with embarrassment. She could hear whispers from the table next to them. This was exactly the kind of situation she always hoped to avoid. The man continued looking at her with impatience. "I'm sure you're a nice girl, but I need someone who was born here. Someone who speaks English as their first language. This is a business dinner and I can't have any confusion." Maria's hands shook slightly as she held her notepad. She thought about all the times she had practiced her English. She remembered staying up late studying grammar books and watching American TV shows to improve her accent. She had worked so hard to speak well. The restaurant seemed quieter now. Maria could feel eyes watching her from all directions. Some customers looked sympathetic, while others seemed curious about what would happen next. The hostess near the front door was also watching with concern. Maria had 2 choices. She could walk away and get her manager James to handle the situation. That would be the safe thing to do. Or she could try to handle it herself. But how could she prove that her English was good enough? The man tapped his fingers on the table, waiting for her to leave. He had already looked back at his phone, dismissing her completely. Maria felt angry but also sad. This happened to many of her friends who worked in restaurants and hotels. People made assumptions about them because of their accents. Maria thought about her college degree hanging on the wall of her tiny apartment. She thought about all the books she had read and the papers she had written. She thought about her dreams and goals that brought her to America 5 years ago. She also thought about her younger brother and sister back in El Salvador. They were counting on the money she sent home each month. They needed her to keep this job. If she caused trouble with a wealthy customer, she might get fired. But something inside Maria felt different tonight. Maybe she was tired of being treated this way. Maybe she was ready to show people who she really was. She took a deep breath and made her decision. Instead of walking away, Maria stood a little taller. She looked directly at the man who was still focused on his phone. Her heart was beating fast, but she felt a strange sense of calm. The man glanced up at her again, surprised that she was still standing there. "Did you not understand what I said?" he asked with more annoyance in his voice. Maria cleared her throat. Softly, She was about to do something that could change everything. She knew this moment would either go very well or very badly. There was no middle ground. Other restaurant staff members were starting to notice the situation. James, the manager, was walking toward their section. Maria saw him coming and knew she had only a few seconds to act. The wealthy man looked at his expensive watch again and sighed loudly. "Look, I don't have time for this. Just get me someone else, please." Maria felt all the emotions of the past 2 years working in restaurants. All the time she had been treated like she was not smart enough or good enough. All the time she had stayed quiet to keep her job. All the time she had let people underestimate her. Tonight was going to be different. Tonight Maria Santos was going to surprise everyone in that restaurant, starting with the rude man at table 7. She had been hiding her true abilities for too long. It was time to show the world who she really was. The man was about to call for the manager himself when Maria made her choice. She was no longer going to be invisible. She was no longer going to let people make wrong assumptions about her. This was her moment to shine, and she was going to take it. Maria took a deep breath and looked straight at the man. Her voice changed completely. Gone was any trace of an accent. Her English became smooth and clear, like someone who had grown up speaking it her whole life. "I sincerely apologize if my accent caused you any concern, sir," Maria said with perfect pronunciation. Each word was crisp and professional. "Perhaps I can assist you in English this evening." The man stopped looking at his phone. His eyes went wide with surprise. He had not expected this at all. The voice coming from the young waitress sounded completely different from before. But Maria was not finished. She smiled politely and continued speaking. "Or if you would prefer, puedo ayudarte en español." Her Spanish was smooth and natural. Then she switched again. "Posso aiutarti in italiano." Her Italian sounded like she was born in Rome. The man's mouth fell open slightly. He was staring at Maria like he could not believe what he was hearing. Other customers at nearby tables had stopped their conversations to listen. Maria continued without pausing. "Je peux vous aider en français?" Her French was elegant and refined. Then she added, "Oder ich kann Ihnen auf Deutsch helfen." Her German was precise and confident. The restaurant became very quiet. Everyone was listening now. The man at table 7 looked completely shocked. His phone was still in his hand, but he had forgotten all about his business calls. "I speak 7 languages fluently," Maria said, returning to her perfect English. "So please let me know which one would make you most comfortable for your dining experience tonight." The man just sat there with his mouth open. He looked around the restaurant and saw that everyone was staring at their table. Some people were smiling and nodding with approval. Others looked just as surprised as he did. Maria stood calmly beside the table, holding her notepad. She felt proud but also nervous. She had never done anything like this before at work. She wondered if she had made a big mistake. The man finally found his voice. I don't understand," he stammered. Where did you learn to speak like that?" "I have a master's degree in international relations from Columbia University," Maria replied simply. "I graduated with highest honors 3 years ago." Now the man looked even more confused. "Then why are you working here as a waitress?" he asked. Maria's smile became a little sad. "Because I have student loans to pay and a family to support. Sometimes life does not go as planned." The man slowly put his phone down on the table. He was starting to understand what had just happened. He had judged this young woman completely wrong. He felt embarrassed and ashamed. "My name is Maria Santos," she continued. "I moved here from El Salvador 5 years ago. I worked 3 jobs while studying to pay for my education. Now I work here to send money home to my younger brother and sister so they can go to school too." People at other tables were nodding and whispering to each other. Some were looking at the man with disapproval. He was starting to realize how badly he had acted. James, the restaurant manager, finally reached their table. He looked worried about what was happening. "Is everything okay here?" he asked. The man held up his hand. "Actually, yes, everything is fine." He looked back at Maria with respect in his eyes for the first time. I owe this lady a very sincere apology. Maria waited to see what he would say next. Her heart was still beating fast from what she had just done. She had never been so bold with a customer before. The man stood up from his chair. He was tall and looked even more impressive standing, but now his face showed shame instead of arrogance. Miss Santos, I am deeply sorry for my behavior. What I said was completely inappropriate and wrong. He extended his hand to her. My name is Richard Blackwood. I made a terrible assumption about you based on nothing but prejudice. That was unacceptable. Maria shook his hand. His grip was firm and his apology seemed genuine. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I accept your apology. No, it's not enough, Richard said. What I did was not just rude, it was ignorant. You clearly have more education and language skills than most people I know, including myself. Other customers in the restaurant were still watching the scene. Some started clapping softly. They had witnessed something special, a moment where someone stood up for themselves with dignity and intelligence. James, the manager, looked relieved that the situation was being resolved peacefully. He patted Maria on the shoulder. Maria is one of our best employees, he told Richard. She's professional, smart, and our customers love her. Richard nodded. I can see why. Miss Santos, would it be possible for me to speak with you after your shift tonight? I'd like to buy you coffee and apologize properly. I feel terrible about this. Maria was surprised by his request. Usually when situations like this happened, the customer just left and never came back. That's very kind, but not necessary, Mr. Blackwood. Please, Richard insisted. I need to make this right. And honestly, I'm curious about your story. Someone, with your qualifications and language abilities, and there might be opportunities I could tell you about. Maria looked at James, who nodded encouragingly. My shift ends at 10 o'clock, she said. Perfect. I'll wait at the coffee shop next door. Richard sat back down at his table. Now, could I please order dinner? And I'd be honored if you would serve me. Maria smiled genuinely for the first time since the encounter began. Of course, sir. What can I get for you tonight? As Maria took his order, Richard found himself impressed by her professionalism. She recommended dishes in perfect English, explained ingredients, and even mentioned which wines would pair well with his meal. When she walked away to place his order, Richard sat back in his chair and shook his head. He had almost made one of the biggest mistakes of his business career. He had nearly missed out on meeting someone extraordinary because of his own prejudice. Other diners came up to Maria throughout the evening to compliment her on what they had witnessed. Word spread quickly through the restaurant about the waitress, who spoke 5 languages and had stood up to a rude customer with such grace. Maria felt different for the rest of her shift. She had finally shown people who she really was. She had been hiding her abilities for so long, trying to fit in and not cause trouble. Tonight she had been brave enough to let her true self shine. As 10 o'clock approached, Maria wondered what this Richard Blackwood wanted to talk about. She had looked him up on her phone during her break. He was the CEO of a major international consulting company. Why would someone like that want to have coffee with a waitress? Little did Maria know that this conversation would change her life forever. At exactly 10:15, Maria walked into the small coffee shop next to Bella Vista. She had changed out of her work uniform and into a simple blue dress. She felt nervous, but also curious about what Richard Blackwood wanted to discuss. Richard was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He stood up when he saw her coming. He had also changed clothes and looked less formal in a casual shirt and jacket. Miss Santos, thank you for coming, he said, pulling out a chair for her. I wasn't sure you would show up. I keep my promises, Mr. Blackwood, Maria replied, sitting down. The coffee smelled good and she was tired after her long shift. Richard sat across from her and looked uncomfortable. I've been thinking about what happened tonight for the past 2 hours. I can't stop feeling ashamed of myself. Maria sipped her coffee. It was perfectly made, much better than the instant coffee she usually drank at home. You apologized already. People make mistakes. No, this was more than a mistake, Richard said firmly. I judged you based on your appearance and accent. I assumed you were less educated or capable than me. That's not just wrong, it's everything I try to teach my own children not to do. Maria studied his face. He seemed genuinely upset about his behavior. Most people who acted rudely just forgot about it and moved on. Richard appeared to be taking this very seriously. Can you tell me about yourself? Richard asked. I mean, if you're comfortable sharing. I'm curious about how someone with your background ended up working at a restaurant. Maria thought for a moment. She usually kept her personal story private, but something about Richard's sincere manner made her want to open up. I grew up in a small town in El Salvador, she began. My father worked in construction, and my mother cleaned houses. They had very little education, but they always told us that learning was the most important thing. Richard listened carefully, not interrupting. When I was 17, violence in our area got very bad. My parents sold everything they owned to send me to America. They believed I could build a better life here and help my younger siblings later. That must have been terrifying, Richard said softly, leaving everything behind so young. Maria nodded. I came here with $200 and very basic English. I stayed with a cousin in Queens and worked in a grocery store during the day. At night, I went to English classes at the community center. She paused to drink more coffee. The memories were still difficult to talk about. After 2 years, my English got better and I saved enough money for community college. I studied so hard. I wanted to make my parents' sacrifice worth something. How did you learn so many languages? Richard asked with genuine interest. I've always been good with languages, Maria explained. In El Salvador, I spoke Spanish and some indigenous languages my grandmother taught me. When I came here, I had to learn English quickly. Then in college, I realized that knowing languages could help me get better jobs. Richard was impressed. So you taught yourself Italian, French, and German? Mostly, yes. I used library books, online programs, and I made friends with international students. I practiced every day. Languages opened doors for me. What about your degree from Columbia? Richard asked. Maria's face lit up with pride. That was my biggest dream. After community college, I transferred to Columbia. I worked 3 jobs to pay for it. I cleaned offices at night, tutored students on weekends, and worked at a translation company during the day. That sounds exhausting, Richard said with admiration. It was worth it, Maria replied. When I graduated, I thought my real life would finally begin. I had interviews with international companies, government agencies, and consulting firms. Richard noticed her expression change. But something went wrong? Maria sighed. The translation company I worked for went out of business right after I graduated. The owner disappeared with 2 months of unpaid wages. I couldn't afford to wait for other job opportunities because I had rent to pay and student loans coming due. So you took the restaurant job temporarily, Richard guessed. Temporarily became 2 years, Maria said with a sad smile. The money is actually decent with tips, and it gives me flexibility to keep looking for other work. But most companies want someone with experience in their field, not just education. Richard shook his head. That's incredibly frustrating. You have exactly the skills that companies say they want, but they won't give you a chance to prove it. Exactly, Maria agreed. And when I go to interviews, some people have the same reaction you had tonight. They hear my accent and assume I'm not qualified, even though my resume shows otherwise. Richard felt even worse about his behavior. I'm so sorry, Maria, I was part of the problem tonight. But you changed your mind when you learned the truth, Maria pointed out. Many people would have just left the restaurant angry. Richard was quiet for a moment, thinking. Can I ask you something personal? Why do you hide your abilities at work? Tonight was the first time you showed what you could really do. Maria considered the question carefully. I learned early that some people get uncomfortable when they find out I'm more educated than they expect. They treat me differently, like I'm showing off or trying to be better than them. It's easier to just be a friendly waitress. That's a tragedy, Richard said with feeling. You're hiding your light under a bushel basket. What do you mean? Maria asked. It's an old saying. It means you're keeping your talents hidden when you should be letting them shine. The world needs people like you, Maria. People who can bridge cultures and languages. Maria felt a warmth in her chest at his words. It had been a long time since someone had talked about her abilities with such respect. What kind of work do you do, Mr. Blackwood? She asked, changing the subject. Please, call me Richard. I own an international consulting company called Blackwood International. We help American companies expand into foreign markets and assist foreign companies entering the American market. Maria's eyes widened with interest. That sounds like exactly the kind of work I studied for. That's what I was thinking, Richard said with growing excitement. We're always struggling with language barriers and cultural misunderstandings. Our clients come from all over the world and sometimes things get lost in translation. Do you have translators on staff? Maria asked. We hire freelancers when we need them, but it's not the same as having someone who really understands both the language and the business context, someone who can catch the subtle meanings and cultural nuances. Richard paused and looked directly at Maria. I have to ask you something, and please be honest. Are you interested in this type of work, or are you happy with what you're doing now? Maria felt her heart speed up. Was he offering her a job? I would love to work in international business. It's what I trained for. But I have responsibilities. I send money to my family every month and I can't take a big risk with my income. I understand completely, Richard said. Family comes first. But what if I told you there might be an opportunity that could pay you more than you make now and use your real skills? Maria felt excited but also cautious. What kind of opportunity? Richard smiled. Let me be completely honest with you, Maria. I've been looking for someone exactly like you for months. Someone with your language abilities, cultural knowledge, and educational background. I just never thought I'd find that person working as a waitress. Are you offering me a job? Maria asked directly. I'm thinking about it very seriously, Richard replied. But first, I'd like to see what you can do. Would you be willing to help me with a business situation next week? As a paid consultant? If it goes well, we could talk about something more permanent. Maria felt like she was dreaming. Could this really be happening? After 2 years of feeling stuck, was someone finally giving her a chance to use her education? What would I have to do? She asked. Richard grinned. Show a room full of businessmen that assumptions can be very dangerous things. Maria could barely sleep that night. She kept thinking about her conversation with Richard Blackwood. Was this really happening? Or was it too good to be true? She had learned to be careful about offers that seemed too perfect. The next morning, Maria called in sick to work at Bella Vista. She needed time to think clearly about Richard's proposition. She also wanted to research his company more thoroughly before making any decisions. At the local library, Maria spent hours reading about Blackwood International. The company was legitimate and successful. Richard Blackwood was well respected in the business community. There were articles about him in business magazines and newspapers. He seemed to be exactly who he claimed to be. But Maria was still cautious. She had heard stories from other immigrants about people who made big promises but delivered nothing. She decided to call Richard and ask more specific questions about what he was offering. When Richard answered his phone, he sounded genuinely happy to hear from her. Maria, I was hoping you would call. I've been thinking about our conversation all morning. I have some questions about what you mentioned last night, Maria said carefully. Can you tell me more about this business situation you want me to help with? Of course, Richard replied. I have a major deal that's been falling apart for weeks. We're trying to close a partnership with companies from 3 different countries, Germany, France, and Mexico. The problem is communication and cultural misunderstandings. Maria felt interested despite her caution. This was exactly the kind of work she had studied for in college. What kind of misunderstandings? The German company thinks the Mexican company is being disrespectful because they're not following strict time schedules. The French company is offended because they think the Americans are being too direct and rude. The Mexican company feels like everyone else is looking down on them. And you think I could help solve these problems? Maria asked. I think you could be the bridge between all of them, Richard said with confidence. You understand different cultures and you speak their languages. Most importantly, you can help them see past their assumptions about each other. Maria was quiet for a moment, thinking. What would happen if I couldn't fix the situation? What if the deal still falls apart? Then we tried our best and learned something valuable, Richard replied. But Maria, I have a good feeling about this. I think you have skills that our regular consultants don't have. What would you pay me for this work? Maria asked directly. She needed to know if this would be worth the risk. $5,000 for 1 week of work, Richard said without hesitation, whether the deal succeeds or fails. Maria almost dropped the phone. $5,000 was more than she made in 3 months at the restaurant. That seems like a lot of money for 1 week. It's a $50 million deal, Maria. If you help us close it, $5,000 is nothing. And if you do well, we can discuss a permanent position with a salary of $80,000 per year, plus benefits. Maria's head was spinning. $80,000 a year was more money than she had ever imagined making. It was enough to pay off her student loans, send her siblings to college, and still have money left for herself. I don't understand why. You're willing to offer me so much, Maria said honestly. You barely know me. Richard was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something personal, Maria? Last night you taught me a lesson about judging people. You handled my rudeness with more grace and intelligence than I deserved. That told me a lot about your character, he continued. But more than that, I've been in business for 25 years. I've learned to recognize talent when I see it. You have something special. Not just your language skills, but your ability to connect with people and make them comfortable. Maria felt touched by his words, but she was still worried about leaving her current job. What if I take this risk, and it doesn't work out? I'll lose my steady income from the restaurant. I understand your concern, Richard said. How about this? Keep your restaurant job for now. Work with me next week as a trial. If it goes well and you want to join my company permanently, I'll give you a signing bonus to cover any lost wages while you transition. This sounded more reasonable to Maria. She wouldn't have to give up her security right away. How big of a signing bonus? $10,000, Richard replied, plus your first month's salary paid in advance. Maria sat down heavily in the library chair. This was definitely not a normal job offer. Why are you being so generous? Because good people are hard to find, Maria. People with integrity, intelligence, and the ability to work with others are rare. I'm not being generous, I'm being smart. Investing in you will pay off for both of us. Maria thought about her brother and sister back in El Salvador. With this kind of money, she could bring them to America and pay for their education. She could finally stop worrying about rent and groceries every month, but she also thought about all the times she had been disappointed before. Jobs that seemed promising but led nowhere. People who made promises they didn't keep. I need to think about this, Maria said finally. Can I give you an answer tomorrow? Take all the time you need, Richard said. But the business meetings start Monday morning. If you're going to help, I need to know by Sunday so I can prepare everyone. After Maria hung up the phone, she sat in the library for another hour, just thinking. She made a list of pros and cons in her notebook. The opportunity seemed amazing, but the risks were real. That evening, Maria called her parents in El Salvador. She told them about Richard's offer, though she left out some details because she didn't want to worry them. Her mother was excited. Mija, this sounds like an answer to our prayers. You've worked so hard for this opportunity. Her father was more cautious. Be careful, Maria. Make sure this man is honest. There are people who take advantage of immigrants. I've researched him, Papa. He's legitimate. But I'm scared to take such a big risk. Sometimes the biggest risk is not taking any risk at all, her mother said wisely. You've been safe at the restaurant, but are you happy? Are you using the education we sacrificed to give you? That night, Maria looked at her college diploma hanging on her apartment wall. She thought about all the late nights studying, all the jobs she had worked to pay for school, all the dreams she had put on hold. She also thought about Richard's face when she had spoken those 5 languages at the restaurant. He had looked at her with respect and amazement. When was the last time someone had looked at her that way? Maria made her decision. She would take the risk. She would trust Richard Blackwood and trust herself. It was time to stop hiding her abilities and start using them. She picked up her phone and dialed Richard's number. "Richard, it's Maria. I've made my decision." "And?" he asked hopefully. "I'll help you with your business deal. Let's see what happens." Richard's voice was full of excitement. "Wonderful. Can you meet me at my office tomorrow morning? We have a lot of preparation to do before Monday." As Maria hung up the phone, she felt scared and excited at the same time. In 3 days, she would walk into a room full of international businessmen and try to save a $50 million deal. She had no idea that this would be the beginning of a completely new life. Monday morning arrived faster than Maria had expected. She stood outside the tall glass building that housed Blackwood International, wearing her best business suit. Her heart was beating fast with nervousness and excitement. Richard met her in the lobby at exactly 8 o'clock. He looked professional and confident in his dark blue suit. "Good morning, Maria. Are you ready for this?" "I think so," Maria replied, though she wasn't completely sure. "I studied all the documents you gave me this weekend. I feel like I understand the situation." "You'll do great," Richard said, as they rode the elevator to the 23rd floor. "Remember, these are all successful business people, but they're letting their cultural assumptions get in the way of a good deal. Your job is to help them see past those assumptions." The elevator doors opened to reveal a modern office with floor-to-ceiling, windows overlooking Miami. Maria had never worked in such an impressive building before. She tried not to look too amazed as Richard led her to the conference room. "Before we go in," Richard said, stopping outside the conference room door, "I want you to know that some of my colleagues are skeptical about this idea. They think I'm crazy for asking a waitress to help with such an important deal." Maria felt a familiar worry in her stomach. "What if they're right? What if I can't do this?" "Then we'll know we tried everything possible," Richard said firmly. "But I believe in you, Maria. Trust yourself." Richard opened the conference room door. Inside was a long table with video screens on the wall. 3 different groups of people were visible on the screens: the German team in Berlin, the French team in Paris, and the Mexican team in Mexico City. Around the conference table sat 5 people from Richard's company. They all looked experienced and professional. Maria could tell from their faces that they were not sure about her being there. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Maria Santos," Richard announced. "She's going to help us work through the communication issues we've been having." One of Richard's colleagues, an older woman named Janet, looked skeptical. "Richard, are you sure about this? This deal is worth $50 million. Maybe we should stick with our usual approach." "Our usual approach hasn't been working, Janet," Richard replied calmly. "We've been trying to fix this for 3 weeks. It's time to try something different." Maria felt all eyes in the room looking at her. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of everything she had learned in college about international business and cultural differences. The video conference began with everyone introducing themselves again. The tension in the room was obvious, even through the computer screens. The German team looked frustrated and impatient. The French team appeared cold and formal. The Mexican team seemed defensive and hurt. Maria listened carefully as each team explained their concerns about the partnership. Just as Richard had described, they were all talking past each other instead of to each other. The German team leader, Klaus, spoke first. "We have been very clear about our timeline requirements. When we say a meeting starts at 9 o'clock, we expect everyone to be ready at 9 o'clock, not 9:15 or 9:30. The Mexican team leader, Carlos, looked offended. "We have explained many times that our business culture values relationship building before jumping into technical details. A few minutes of friendly conversation is normal and respectful." The French team leader, Philippe, shook his head with frustration. "Meanwhile, the American team has been so focused on deadlines and profit margins that they have shown no interest in the quality and craftsmanship that makes this partnership valuable." Maria could see that each team had valid points, but they were all so focused on their own perspectives that they couldn't understand the others. This was exactly what she had studied in her international relations classes. For the first 30 Minutes Maria just listened. She took notes in 3 different languages, making sure she understood not just what each team was saying, but what they really meant. Finally, Richard looked at her and nodded. It was time for her to speak. Maria stood up and addressed the German team first, speaking in perfect German. Klaus, I understand that punctuality and efficiency are very important in German business culture. These values have made German companies successful all over the world. Klaus looked surprised to hear his own language spoken so well. He nodded approvingly. Then Maria turned to the Mexican team and spoke in Spanish. Carlos, I also understand that in Mexican business culture, personal relationships are the foundation of successful partnerships. Building trust and friendship makes the business stronger. Carlos smiled for the first time during the meeting. He seemed relieved that someone understood his perspective. Finally, Maria addressed the French team in French. Philippe, I recognize that French business culture values quality, elegance, and attention to detail. These are the qualities that make French products respected around the world. Philippe looked impressed and sat up straighter in his chair. Now, Maria switched back to English, addressing everyone at once. Each of your cultures brings important strengths to this partnership. The German focus on efficiency, the Mexican emphasis on relationships, and the French commitment to quality. These are all valuable. The room was completely quiet. Everyone was listening carefully to what Maria was saying. The problem is not that any of you are wrong, Maria continued. The problem is that you are all trying to force the others to work exactly like you do, instead of finding ways to combine your strengths. She walked to the whiteboard and began drawing a simple diagram. What if we created a schedule that honors German efficiency, but starts each meeting with 5 minutes for the relationship building that is important to Mexican culture? What if we set quality standards that meet French expectations, but organize them in a timeline that works for German planning? Maria could see people starting to nod on all the video screens. She was making sense to them. Klaus, what if Carlos's team starts each meeting by sharing 1 minute about how their work is progressing? This builds the personal connection they value, but within a time limit that respects your schedule. Klaus considered this. That could work, as long as we stick to the time limit. Maria turned to Carlos. And Carlos, what if your team prepared their relationship-building comments in advance? That way you can still share personal connections, but in an efficient way that Klaus appreciates. Carlos nodded enthusiastically. Yes, we can do that. We just want to be seen as people, not just business functions. Then Maria addressed Philippe. And Philippe, what if we created quality checkpoints throughout the project timeline? Your team could review and approve each stage, ensuring French standards are met without slowing down the German schedule. Philippe smiled. That would actually give us more control over quality than we have now. For the next 2 hours, Maria helped the 3 teams work through their specific disagreements. She translated not just languages, but cultures. She helped them understand that their different approaches weren't right or wrong, they were just different. By noon, the teams had agreed on a new structure for their partnership. They had a timeline that satisfied the Germans, relationship-building activities that pleased the Mexicans, and quality standards that met French requirements. When the video conference ended, the conference room in Miami was quiet for a moment. Then Janet, who had been skeptical about Maria earlier, started clapping. The other colleagues joined in. That was incredible, Janet said to Maria. In 3 hours, you solved problems that we've been struggling with for weeks. Richard was beaming with pride. Maria, that was even better than I hoped. You didn't just translate languages, you translated entire ways of thinking. Maria felt overwhelmed with happiness and relief. She had done it. She had proved that her education and abilities were valuable in the real business world. Over the next few days, the 3 international teams worked smoothly together using the framework Maria had created. By Friday, they had signed the $50 million partnership agreement. Richard called Maria into his office that afternoon. Congratulations, he said, handing her a check for $5,000. You've earned every penny of this. Thank you. You? Maria said, looking at the check. It was more money than she had ever held at one time. Now, Richard said with a smile, let's talk about that permanent position. 2 weeks later, Maria walked into Bella Vista restaurant for the last time as an employee. She was wearing a new business suit and carrying a small gift bag. Her former coworkers gathered around her with excitement and curiosity. I can't believe you're really leaving, said Jennifer, another waitress who had become Maria's friend. It feels like yesterday that you were just serving tables like the rest of us. Maria hugged Jennifer warmly. I'll never forget working here. This place taught me so much about dealing with different types of people. James, the restaurant manager, came out of his office with a sad smile. Maria, you've been one of our best employees. Are you sure about this new job? Restaurant work is steady money. I'm sure, Maria replied confidently. But I want to thank everyone here. You've all been like family to me. Maria had brought small gifts for each of her coworkers, books about language learning and international cultures. She wanted to share some of the knowledge that had changed her life. If any of you ever want to improve your language skills or learn about other cultures, these books are a good start, Maria explained. You never know when it might open doors for you. Some of the younger employees looked interested. Maria had always been popular with her coworkers because she helped them practice English or Spanish during slow times. As Maria said her final goodbyes, she thought about how different her life had become in just 3 weeks. She was about to start working as Director of International Relations at Blackwood International, with a salary that seemed unreal to her. The next morning, Maria arrived at her new office on the 23rd floor. Richard had given her a corner office with windows overlooking the city. Her name was already on the door in gold letters, Maria Santos, Director of International Relations. Inside the office, Maria found a large desk, comfortable chairs, and a bookshelf. On the desk was a welcome note from Richard and a laptop computer that was hers to keep. She had never owned such an expensive computer before. Richard knocked on her open door. Good morning, Maria. How does it feel to be in your new office? It feels like a dream, Maria admitted, looking around at the beautiful space. I keep waiting to wake up. It's real, Richard assured her with a smile. And we have work to do. 3 new clients want to meet with you this week. Word is already spreading about what you did with the German-French-Mexican deal. Maria felt excited and nervous at the same time. What kind of clients? A Japanese company that wants to expand into South America, a Brazilian company looking for American partners, and an Italian family business that's having trouble with their British distributors. Each of these situations sounded challenging, but interesting to Maria. This was exactly the kind of work she had dreamed about doing when she was studying at Columbia. Richard continued, I also want you to know that you have a budget for continuing education. The company will pay for any language classes, business courses, or conferences that could help you do your job better. Maria was amazed. Not only was she getting paid well to use her existing skills, but the company wanted to invest in helping her learn even more. Over her first month at Blackwood International, Maria threw herself into her new role with enthusiasm. She discovered that her experience working in restaurants had actually prepared her well for business consulting. At Bella Vista, she had learned to read people quickly, handle difficult situations calmly, and make everyone feel welcome. These skills proved invaluable when dealing with stressed business executives from different cultures. Maria's first major success came with the Japanese-Brazilian project. The Japanese company was frustrated because they felt the Brazilian company was being disorganized and unreliable. The Brazilian company was hurt because they felt the Japanese company was being cold and inflexible. Maria arranged separate meetings with each team first. She learned that the Japanese company was used to very detailed, long-term planning. They wanted to know exactly what would happen in the next 2 years. The Brazilian company, on the other hand, preferred to be flexible and adapt their plans as situations changed. They thought the Japanese company's detailed requirements were unnecessary and restrictive. In her report to Richard, Maria explained the cultural differences. The Japanese value certainty and predictability because it allows them to plan efficiently. The Brazilians value flexibility because it allows them to respond to opportunities quickly. Both approaches have advantages. Maria's solution was creative. She suggested creating a basic framework that satisfied the Japanese need for structure, but included regular review points where the Brazilians could suggest changes and improvements. The strategy worked perfectly. Both companies felt comfortable with the arrangement, and they signed a major partnership agreement within 6 weeks. By her third month at Blackwood International, Maria had successfully handled 7 international business disputes. Her success rate was remarkable, and other consulting companies were starting to ask Richard about his secret weapon. Maria's approach was different from traditional business consultants. Instead of just focusing on legal contracts and financial terms, she spent time understanding the cultural and emotional aspects of business relationships. She created what she called cultural bridge plans for each client situation. These were detailed guides that helped businesses understand not just what their international partners were doing, but why they were doing it. Richard was impressed by Maria's innovation. "You're not just solving individual problems," he told her during one of their weekly meetings. "You're developing a whole new approach to international consulting." Maria felt proud of her work, but she also felt a responsibility to help other immigrants who might be in situations similar to her own. She started volunteering at a local community center, teaching business English to recent immigrants. "Many of you have valuable skills and education," she would tell her students. "Don't let language barriers or cultural misunderstandings prevent you from achieving your goals." Some of her students had been doctors, engineers, and teachers in their home countries. They were working in restaurants, cleaning services, and construction, while trying to get their credentials recognized in America. Maria understood their frustration perfectly. She began helping some of them prepare for job interviews and navigate the business culture of American companies. Richard noticed Maria's volunteer work and was supportive. "What you're doing is important," he told her. "You're helping people realize their potential just like you realized yours." 6 months after starting at Blackwood International, Maria received her first performance review. Richard and the other company executives were unanimous in their praise. "Maria has exceeded every expectation we had," Janet said during the review meeting. "Her client satisfaction rate is 98%, and she's brought in over $5 million in new business." But the numbers weren't what made Maria most proud. What meant the most to her were the thank you letters from clients who said she had helped them understand and appreciate different cultures for the first time. One letter from Klaus, the German team leader from her first project, particularly touched her. He wrote, "Maria taught me that efficiency and relationship building are not opposites. They can work together to create something better than either one alone." As Maria read these letters in her corner office, she thought about the night when Richard Blackwood had rudely asked her to send someone who spoke proper English. That moment of discrimination had led to the greatest opportunity of her life. She also thought about her parents in El Salvador, who were so proud when she told them about her success. She was now able to send them enough money not just for basic expenses, but for small luxuries they had never been able to afford. Most importantly, Maria's younger brother and sister were now planning to come to America for college. Maria would be able to pay for their education without going into debt. Looking back, Maria realized that every difficult experience in her journey had prepared her for this success. Her struggles with language barriers had taught her empathy for others facing the same challenges. Her experience with discrimination had given her the determination to prove people wrong about immigrants and their abilities. As she prepared for another international client meeting, Maria smiled at her reflection in her office window. She was no longer hiding her abilities or accepting less than she deserved. She was finally living up to her full potential and helping others do the same. 1 year after starting at Blackwood International, Maria's life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. She was sitting in a television studio in New York City, preparing for an interview on a popular business news show. The producer, a young woman named Sarah, was checking Maria's microphone. "We're so excited to have you on the show, Mrs. Santos. Your story has been getting a lot of attention in the business world." Maria still felt amazed when people called her story inspiring. To her, she had simply worked hard and taken advantage of an opportunity. But she was learning that her journey resonated with many people. The host will ask you about your background and how you developed your approach to international business consulting, Sarah explained. Just be yourself and tell your story naturally. When the cameras started rolling, Maria felt nervous for a moment. Then she remembered all the difficult situations she had navigated over the past year. A television interview was nothing compared to resolving a heated business dispute between 5 different countries. The host, David Chen, welcomed her warmly. Our guest today is Maria Santos, who has become one of the most successful international business consultants in the country. Maria, tell us how you went from working as a waitress to closing $50 million deals. Maria smiled and began telling her story. She talked about growing up in El Salvador, coming to America with big dreams and struggling to find work that used her education. She described the night Richard Blackwood asked her to send someone who spoke proper English. That moment could have been just another painful experience of discrimination, Maria explained. But instead, I decided to show him who I really was. Sometimes we have to be brave enough to let our talents shine, even when people don't expect it from us. David leaned forward with interest. What happened next has become legendary in business circles. You spoke to him in 5 different languages perfectly. I realized I had been hiding my abilities because I was afraid of making people uncomfortable, Maria said. But hiding who we are doesn't protect us, it just makes us invisible. The interview continued for 20 minutes. Maria talked about her work at Blackwood International and her approach to solving cultural conflicts in business. You've developed something called cultural bridge plans, David said. Can you explain what those are? Most business problems that seem to be about money or contracts are actually about misunderstanding, Maria explained. When a German company thinks a Mexican company is disorganized, or when an American company thinks a Japanese company is too slow, they're usually just seeing their own culture as the right way to do business. Maria continued, a cultural bridge plan helps each side understand why the other side works the way they do. Once people understand the reasons behind different approaches, they can usually find ways to work together effectively. After the television appearance, Maria received hundreds of emails from viewers. Many were from immigrants who said her story gave them hope. Others were from business leaders who wanted to learn more about her methods. One email particularly touched Maria. It was from a young woman named Ana, who had come to America from Guatemala and was working as a hotel maid while studying accounting. I saw your interview and realized I've been making myself small, Ana wrote. I speak 4 languages and I'm good with numbers, but I never mention these skills at work because I'm afraid people will think I'm showing off. Your story made me realize I should be proud of what I know. Maria responded to Ana's email personally, encouraging her to apply for accounting jobs and offering to help her prepare for interviews. This led to Maria mentoring several young immigrants who were struggling to advance in their careers. Word about Maria's mentoring work spread, and she was invited to speak at conferences and universities. Her message was always the same. Diversity of thought and experience makes businesses stronger, not weaker. At one conference in Chicago, Maria met Dr. Patricia Williams, a professor of international business at Northwestern University. Dr. Williams had been following Maria's work with great interest. Your approach to cultural consulting is revolutionary, Dr. Williams told Maria after her speech. Have you considered writing a book about your methods? Maria had never thought about writing a book. I don't know if I'm qualified to write about business theory. I just solve problems using what I learned from experience. That's exactly why you should write it, Dr. Williams insisted. Most business books are written by people with lots of academic theory but limited real-world experience. You have both the education and the practical success to back up your ideas. The idea of writing a book excited Maria, but she wasn't sure she had time. Her consulting work was busier than ever, and she was committed to her mentoring activities. Richard solved this problem by offering Maria a sabbatical. Take 6 months to write your book, he suggested. The company will continue paying your salary, and when you're done, you'll come back as our senior vice president of global strategy. Maria was stunned by the generous offer. Why would you do that for me? Because your book will help our entire industry improve, Richard explained. And because investing in your growth is the best business decision I can make. During her sabbatical, Maria wrote Building Bridges, a new approach to cross-cultural business. The book combined her personal story with practical advice for businesses working across cultures. She included case studies from her consulting work, showing how cultural misunderstandings could be turned into competitive advantages. She also wrote about the importance of hiring and promoting people from diverse backgrounds. One chapter was titled, The Danger of Assumptions. Maria wrote, When we assume someone is less capable because of their accent, appearance, or background, we don't just hurt that person. We hurt ourselves by missing out on their talents and perspectives. The book was published 8 months later and became an unexpected bestseller. Business schools began using it in their international business courses. Companies started hiring Maria to train their executives on cultural sensitivity. Maria was invited to give a keynote speech at the International Business Leadership Conference in London. Standing on stage in front of 500 business leaders from around the world, she felt overwhelmed by how far she had come. 3 years ago, I was afraid to show my true abilities because I thought people would judge me, Maria told the audience. Today I want to encourage everyone to look for the hidden talents in the people around you. The quiet person in your office might speak 5 languages. The janitor might have an engineering degree. The waitress might be the solution to your biggest business problem. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Afterward, dozens of people approached her with their own stories of overcoming assumptions and finding success. One man introduced himself as Carlos Mendoza, the Mexican business leader from her first consulting project. Maria, I wanted to thank you personally, he said. That project changed not just my business, but my whole perspective on working with people from other cultures. Maria smiled warmly. That project changed my life too, Carlos. It was my first chance to prove what I could do. Well, you certainly proved it, Carlos laughed. My company has used your cultural bridge approach on 12 projects since then. We've never had better relationships with our international partners. As Maria flew back to Miami from London, she reflected on the unexpected path her life had taken. A moment of discrimination that could have discouraged her had instead become the catalyst for achievements beyond her wildest dreams. But what made her happiest wasn't the money, fame, or recognition. It was the emails from people like Anna, who had been inspired to pursue better opportunities. It was the thank you letters from business teams who had learned to appreciate each other's differences. It was knowing that her work was making the business world a little more inclusive and understanding. Maria had not just built a successful career, she had built bridges between cultures, companies, and people, and she was just getting started. 2 years after her book became a bestseller, Maria Santos stood in front of the mirror in her Miami penthouse apartment, adjusting her pearl necklace. Tonight was the annual Blackwood International Gala, and she had a very special reason to be excited. At 29 years old, Maria was now the youngest senior vice president in the company's history. Under her leadership, Blackwood International had expanded into 15 new countries and increased their international revenue by 200%. But tonight wasn't about celebrating her own success. Tonight was about giving back to the community that had supported her journey. Maria's assistant Jennifer, the same Jennifer who used to work with her at Bella Vista, knocked on her office door. "The car is here to take you to the gala," Jennifer announced with a smile. "Thank you," Maria replied. Jennifer had joined Blackwood International 6 months earlier as Maria's executive assistant after Maria encouraged her to take business courses and improve her computer skills. The gala was being held at the same hotel where Maria had first met with international business leaders 3 years ago. As her car pulled up to the elegant entrance, Maria remembered how nervous she had been that first day. Inside the ballroom, 300 business leaders from around the world were celebrating another successful year for Blackwood International. Maria moved through the crowd, greeting clients and colleagues in their native languages. Richard Blackwood found her near the appetizer table, talking with a group of executives from Japan, Brazil, and Germany, the same countries from her first major project. "Maria," Richard said with pride in his voice, I'd like to steal you away for a moment. It's almost time for the main presentation." As they walked toward the stage, Richard reflected on the past few years. "You know, Maria, that night at Bella Vista was the luckiest night of my business career. I almost missed out on the most talented person I've ever worked with because of my own prejudice." Maria smiled warmly. "That night changed both our lives, Richard. It taught me to be brave enough to show who I really am, and it taught you to look beyond your first impressions." Richard nodded seriously. "It was the most valuable lesson I've ever learned, and that's why tonight is so important." They reached the stage where a podium was set up with a large screen behind it. Richard stepped up to the microphone first. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard announced to the crowd, 3 years ago, I made a terrible mistake. I judged someone based on their accent and appearance instead of their abilities and character. That mistake almost cost me the opportunity to work with the most remarkable person I've ever met in business." The audience grew quiet, listening intently to Richard's words. "Tonight, I want to publicly acknowledge how Maria Santos taught me that assumptions can be the enemy of success. When we assume we know someone's capabilities based on superficial characteristics, we don't just hurt that person. We hurt ourselves and our businesses." Richard gestured for Maria to join him on stage. "But more importantly, tonight we're announcing something that will help ensure other talented individuals don't face the barriers that Maria had to overcome." Maria stepped up to the microphone, looking out at the audience of successful business leaders. She spotted several familiar faces, clients she had helped, colleagues who had supported her, and even some of her former co-workers from Bella Vista who were attending as special guests. "Thank you, Richard, for your honesty and for the opportunity you gave me," Maria began. "Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce the launch of the Santos Foundation for Multicultural Business Leadership." The screen behind Maria lit up with the foundation's logo and mission statement. "The Santos Foundation will provide scholarships, mentorship, and job placement assistance for multilingual professionals from immigrant and minority communities," Maria explained. "Too many talented people are working in jobs that don't use their full potential because they face language barriers, cultural discrimination, or lack of professional networks." The audience applauded enthusiastically. Maria continued, "Blackwood International has committed to funding the foundation's first year of operations, and we already have partnerships with 12 other major companies who will provide internships and job opportunities for our program participants." After the presentation, Maria was surrounded by people wanting to learn more about the foundation. Several business leaders offered to contribute funding or provide job opportunities for program participants. Later in the evening, Maria slipped away from the main party to visit a smaller gathering in a private dining room. This was her personal celebration with the people who had supported her journey from the very beginning. Her parents had flown in from El Salvador for the gala. Her younger brother Miguel was there with his girlfriend. He was now studying engineering at the University of Miami on a full scholarship funded by Maria's success. Her sister Carmen was finishing her senior year of high school and planning to study international law. James, her former manager from Bella Vista, was there with several of her old co-workers. Even some of the customers who had witnessed her famous 5-language response to Richard were in attendance. But the most special guest was Anna, the young woman who had written to Maria after seeing her television interview. Anna was now working as a senior accountant at a major firm and had just been promoted to department supervisor. "Maria," Anna said with tears in her eyes, "you changed my life when you told me to stop making myself small. I finally have the confidence to use all my abilities." As Maria looked around the room at all these people whose lives had intersected with hers, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Her journey from waitress to business executive had never been just about her own success. It had been about proving that talent and determination could overcome prejudice and assumptions. Near the end of the evening, Maria found herself back in the main ballroom, standing near the same table where she had first served Richard Blackwood 3 years earlier. A young Latina woman was working as a server for the gala, and Maria watched her navigating between tables with professional grace. Maria approached the young woman during a quiet moment. "Excuse me, what's your name?" "Isabella, ma'am," the server replied politely. seeming surprised that one of the guests was speaking to her directly. "Isabella, do you speak other languages besides English and Spanish?" Maria asked with genuine curiosity. Isabella looked uncertain about whether she should answer. Yes, ma'am. I speak Portuguese and French as well. I studied international business in college." Maria smiled, remembering her own hesitation to reveal her abilities years earlier. "That's wonderful, Isabella. International business is exactly what my company specializes in. Would you be interested in learning about some opportunities we have available?" Isabella's eyes widened with surprise and hope. "Really? You would consider me for a business position?" "Talent is talent regardless of where we find it," Maria replied, handing Isabella her business card. "Call my office on Monday. I'd like to hear more about your background and goals." As Isabella walked away with a huge smile on her face, Maria felt the deep satisfaction of the full circle her life had taken. She was now in a position to give other talented individuals the same opportunity that Richard had given her. Richard appeared beside her, having watched the interaction. "Some things never change," he said with a knowing smile. "You're still finding diamonds in unexpected places." "Everyone deserves a chance to shine," Maria replied. "We just have to be willing to look beyond our assumptions and see people for who they really are." Later that night, as Maria stood on the balcony of her penthouse looking out over the Miami skyline, she thought about how far she had traveled, not just in terms of career success but in terms of personal growth and impact on others. 3 years ago, she had been afraid to show her true abilities because she worried about other people's reactions. Now she was using her platform to help hundreds of other multilingual professionals find opportunities to use their full potential. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her mother. "Mija, we are so proud of the woman you have become. You are not just successful. You are making the world a better place." Maria smiled as she read the message. Success, she had learned, wasn't just about personal achievement. True success was about using your talents and opportunities to lift up others along the way. The next morning, Maria would return to her office and continue her work as Senior Vice President of Global Strategy. She would help companies navigate cultural differences, solve international business disputes, and build bridges between different communities. But she would also continue her work with the Santos Foundation, mentoring young professionals and advocating for more inclusive hiring practices in corporate America. Maria's story had become more than just a personal journey from waitress to executive. It had become a symbol of what was possible when talent was given the opportunity to flourish, regardless of accent, background, or initial circumstances. And in boardrooms, restaurants, and community centers across the country, other young immigrants were hearing Maria's story and finding the courage to let their own abilities shine. The waitress, who had once been asked to send someone who spoke proper English, was now changing the way American businesses thought about diversity, talent, and the true meaning of success.